Um, so welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this session on different approaches to the EU Mercosur Agreement recent estimations. Well, my name is Gabriela Ortiz, and I am professor of economics at the Universidad Nacional de Costa Rica. And as Zeynep says, she is the hosting and recording today's sessions, and will help ensure we keep to our allotted time. Before getting to the presentations, please allow me to remind everyone of the following session protocol and etiquette so that the session runs smoothly. All attendants except the person currently speaking must remain muted. Unless otherwise noted, presentations will last 20 minutes. The session host will verbally prompt the presenter when there are 2 minutes remaining in their allotted time. When the allotted presentation time has elapsed, if the presentation has not already ended, the host will prompt again and will immediately move us onto the discussion period. And discussion periods will last 10 minutes and immediately follow each presentation. Following all but the final presentations, there will be a 2-minute transition period to allow the next presenter time to load and share their presentation. During this transition time, I will introduce the next presenter. So during these sessions, we will hear from three presenters. And without further ado, please allow me to introduce our first speaker, Antonia Ngavozafy, a PhD candidate from Universidad Complutense de Madrid, presenting on new EU Mercosur Association Agreement, Quantitative Impact Assessment of the Liberalization through Tariff Rate Quotas. The floor is yours, Antonia.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Gabriela, for the introduction. As said, my name is Antonia Ngavozafy, a PhD candidate in data science at the Complutense University of Madrid. I am also a quantitative market analyst within the Trade and Market Intelligence section of the UNWTO International Trade Center. I am very happy to have the opportunity to present a quantitative assessment that my co-authors and I have prepared on the impacts of the liberalization through tariff rate quota under the new EU Mercosur agreement. My intervention will be structured as following. First, I will make a brief introduction of the economics of tariff rate quota. Then I will present the patterns and evolution of tariff rate quota under the EU Mercosur agreement. Thirdly, I will explain our model and assessment strategies, and then I will discuss our results before concluding. So tariff rate quota is a trade policy instrument introduced for the first time at the Uruguay Round Agreement on Agriculture. So a tariff rate quota is designed to enhance market access of traded goods, mostly agricultural commodities, which are most of the time subject to strict measures, such as highly prohibitive tariffs or quantitative restrictions, or what we call absolute quota. David Scully defines tariff quota as a two-tiered tariff, where in a given period, a lower in quota tariff is applied to the first Q units of imports, and a higher over quota is applied to all subsequent imports. So in this sense, tariff quota differs from absolute quota, also known as quantitative restriction, because the former does not include, the former does not limit the entry of commodities when the quota volume is filled. Tariff quota generates a rent stemming from the opportunity to import inside the tariff quota at a lower cost. Here, quota have both tariff and non-tariff components. So the tariff part can be ad valorem, specific, mixed, compound, or technical. So the term tariff quota is more technically more accurate than tariff rate quota. However, during our studies and during this presentation, I will be using the term tariff quota and tariff rate quota interchangeably. So here in this table, I summarize the main components of a tariff quota with an example taken from market access map. As you can see, the main components of tariff quotas are in quota tariff, the over quota tariff, the quantity limit, the opening period, which can be annual or only in some periods of time. Then the country coverage, the whole country, all countries in the world can benefit from tariff quota depending on the type, or just some country specific. Also, the elements include the product coverage and the administration method. So in this example of quota on lamb from Argentina exported to the European Union, the inside quota tariff is 0%, which means that until the quantity limit Q of 23,000 tons are not met on imports, then everyone can benefit this 0% tariff. Otherwise, above these 23,000 tons, this tariff over quota tariff equivalent to 44% applies. So this quota here is applicable to all WTO countries with specific inside quota tariff for Argentina. And the administration method is first come, first served. And why did we put special focus on tariff rate quotas? Because tariff quotas impact the willingness to import. It impacts the trade volume. So the effects on trade depends on the effects on trade depends on the excess demand for imports. And also we will show during this presentation that the liberalization through tariff quota can be suboptimal and even inefficient in some cases. Next, what I would like to introduce here is the quota under the EU Mercosur Association agreements in particular. So in the current policy, to date, no Mercosur country grants market access to the EU through tariff rate quota. As of 2021, the EU grants tariff rate quota to Mercosur countries under special WTO regime and country-specific quotas. The WTO quota hierarchy covers products such as lamb, goat meat, beef and veal, so high-quality beef and veal, high-quality bovine meat, poultry, preparation of poultry, garlic, and sugar cane. What we noticed is that most of these quotas are not filled based on data from the EU quota consultation database. Here, once the agreement will enter into force, Mercosur will open two categories of tariff rate quota to their European counterparts: transitional tariff rate quota and reciprocal tariff rate quota. So the transitional tariff rate quota concerns motor vehicles, chocolates, garlic, chocolate powder, and tomatoes. The reciprocal quota, on the other hand, concerns powder milk, cheese, infant formula, and the access quantities on these products are gradually increased over the implementation period. Here you have the tariff rate quota concession of the European Union for Mercosur countries. So when the EU Mercosur agreement will begin to apply, the EU will concede, in addition to the WTO quota that is currently open, the EU will concede preferential tariff rate quota, both transitional and reciprocal, to its American counterparts. Reciprocal tariff rate quota concern comparable products as in Mercosur's concession, while transitional tariff rate quota cover a wider range of sensitive agricultural products such as meat products, cereals, honey, sugar, or ethanol. In the case of the EU, concession contingent of transitional tier Q are phased out over transitory period, then they stay in application as long as the agreement is active. And additionally, the inside quota duties are phased in, while the outside quota tariffs remain at the base rate or reduced by some preferential margin, but they never go to zero. So the result of this liberalization means that products subject to tariff rate quota in the EU concession list, that is approximately 300 HS8 code, will not be fully liberalized at the end of the implementation period. To evaluate the impact of the EU Mercosur association agreement, we use a standard computable general equilibrium model with 8 regions and 36 sectors, where our baseline scenario, where we compare the baseline scenario with 4 different FTA scenarios. The scenarios correspond to the different implementation of the treaty at the entry into force, 5 years after the entry into force, 10 years later, and 15 years later. We incorporated tariff rate quota into their AV estimates. For this specific paper, for this exercise, we did not include NTM, and we used the GTAP 10 database for the simulation. So here is a summary of the sets in our model. So as you can see, we have the 8 countries going from the European Union: Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, United States, China. And on your right side, you can see how the different sectors and how they aggregated sector from the GTAP 10 database. We also group them into agricultural and agro-industry products, manufacturing products, and services. So as I explained earlier, we compare the baseline scenario with the FTA scenarios. For the baseline scenario, we updated the applied tariff with those applied by Mercosur and the EU in 2099 using the alter tax. And then we run 4 different simulations using the actual tariff reduction schedules as stated in the agreement. It means that in the opposite of other studies, we did not do broad assumptions, meaning conservative or ambitious scenario. We take more we took the tariff reduction schedules, which result in more accurate estimations of the liberalization extent. So this is this chart here summarized the process that we used to get the preferential tariff. So we compute the staged preferential tariff based on the schedule of each parties to the agreement. These schedules are publicly available on the EU's website, but also in each country's Ministry of Economy's website. So then once we computed the stage preferential tariff at the national tariff line level, we compute the ad valorem equivalent of non-ad valorem duties. We also compute the ad valorem equivalents of tariff rate quota. After that, we proceed to the aggregation at the HS6, then at the model sectoral level. That results in the aggregated stage preferential tariff that we use to shock the model. So for the AVE of tariff rate quota specifically, we opt for an estimation of their AVE for each of the NTLC impacted. And we considered three possible equilibrium situations. The first one is when the demand supply is below the opened quota. In that case, the AVE is equal to the inside quota tariff. Then in the regime 2, we demand when the demand is equal to the quota, at the quota. And the third regime consists of the case where the demand is over the quota. And in that case, the AVE is equal to the outside quota tariff. So from these three possible equilibrium situations, it turns out that regime 1 and regime 3 appear throughout the implementation of the EU Mercosur association agreement in the schedules of both parties. In Mercosur schedule, tariff quotas on most products fall in the regime 1, meaning below the quota. So the quota open for cheese, milk powder and chocolate, and preparation containing cocoa exceed the demand of those products in 2019 for the first 2 years of implementation of the agreement. So therefore, the quota is not binding. So as a result, the AVE equals the inside quota tariff. And since the inside quota tariff on these products are gradually reduced over time, this product will be fully liberalized. So as you can see on the chart here, in blue, when it's blue, it means that the regime is below the quota. So for these products, powder milk, which are expressed with this HS6 code, and cheese 0406 expressed with this HS6 code, we can see that the regime throughout the implementation of the agreement from 2022 to 2050 are below the quota. And we can see that the AVE in that case is equal to the inside quota tariff, and the AVE is decreasing over time. And from year 1 to 3. So from year 10, so it's from year 9, it means, so from year 10, meaning that that's 9 years after the entry into force of the agreement, we can see that this, the tariff, the AVE taken for those products are equal to 0%. However, some tariff quota in Mercosur schedule fall in the over quota regime. So as you can see here, that is the case for quota on garlic, the first HS6 code that you can see here, 070320. White chocolate, this one. white chocolate and preserved tomatoes. Demands on these products exceed the open quota, and even at the end of the implementation period. So the cases, even though the quota volume of garlic here is, for example, the quota volume on garlic is, for example, increasing from 2,000, so from 2,000 and 2,140 tons to 15,000 tons in 7 years. The contingent are still below the demand. The demand in 2019 was 17,314 tons. So that's why the AVE for those products are equal to the base rate, which are 25%. So regarding white chocolate and tomatoes, their effective liberalization happened from year 14 and year 9, respectively, when the outside quota tariff rate become duty-free.
2 minutes reminder.
All right. So in the case of EU, the quota regimes vary depending on the type of commodities and their sensitivities for the EU market. Tariff quota on bovine meat, meat offal, maize, rice, potato starch, and so on. They fall under the over quota regime. You can also see that for products such as meat of swine, fresh or chilled bovine offal, they fall into the regime 1 below quota. You can see that for some cases, for cheese, the results show that throughout the duration, the implementation period, they all fall in the below quota regime. And in the case of the EU, you have the free regimes depending on the product. So our results, the result of our CGE simulation shows that as soon as the agreement enters into force, GDPs of Mercosur countries increases, while the EU's will remain constant. But at the end of the implementation, all parties to the agreement will benefit from the treaty. Here you can see the percentage changes in traded quantities when importing to the EU. So we can see that for all countries, for all Mercosur countries, the traded quantities will increase. That is in line with our expectation. That is the case for all Mercosur countries, in line with our expectation. And when you do the comparison when the importer is the market is Argentina, we compare the result for the other exporter. We can see that for the third countries, we can witness trade diversion, negative changes in traded quantities for China, the rest of the world, and the United States. But for most products, we can see that the EU, the export from the EU is increasing. This is also the case in when the market is Brazil. Same patterns as in Argentina, and the EU will benefit. The EU will benefit the most in Uruguay and Paraguay. So I come to the conclusion. The efficiency of trade liberalization through tariff rate quota depends on several factors. The tariff quota components, the demand, and the administration method. we saw that the liberalization through tariff rate quota is inefficient when the pre-agreement supply quantities are over the committed contingent. And we can also see, we also witness that the trade liberalization through tariff rate quota is suboptimal, but it remains a second best option to liberalize sensitive and very sensitive products when the committed quota are large enough to allow the maximum number of exporters to benefit from the quota rent. Otherwise, tariff liberalization through quota is not efficient. So thank you very much for your attention. For any questions, the floor is open. I just want to mention that in case you would like to visualize those charts in an interactive way, you can go to my Tableau profile, where you can see all the figures and interact with the charts and analyze the results more efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonia. So now let's go ahead and take some questions from audience. We have one. Yes, David.
Hey. Thank you very much, Antonia, for the presentation. You already talked about the reciprocal and transitional tariff quotas, but I was wondering if you could expand a little bit your explanation on it. I think it would be of interest to the audience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the question, David. The difference, the definition and the difference between these two type of quotas are already explained in the main paper, the paper that we presented last year. But let me share again that to you.
You mentioned some products that are included, considered inside each type, but I think that maybe explain a bit more the difference. I think it would be okay.
Yes. So I would like to show you a couple of figures that explain that better. So as I said, there are two categories of quota under the EU Mercosur agreement: the reciprocal tariff rate quota and the transitional tariff rate quota. So for the reciprocal tariff rate quota, these are categories of quota that concerns the same categories of product in the schedule of Mercosur countries and in the schedule of the EU countries. So here, if you can see that reciprocal quota concerns cheese for the EU, also milk powder, and cheese, milk powder, and also so cheese, milk powder, infant formula. And in the schedule of Mercosur, this quota, also, the reciprocal quota, also concerns cheese, infant formula, and milk powder. So that's the first reason they are reciprocal. Then the transitional quota concerns quota that will not stay in application until the end of the agreement. It means that the quota are in place for the time the agreement is being implemented. And once the agreement is, when the dismantling the tariff reduction is over, then this quota will disappear. The reciprocal quota will remain until the end of the agreement. So here, I think that will be more clearer with this chart. This is the reciprocal quota. You can see that during the implementation of the agreement for in the schedule of Brazil, the quantity of the contingent, the quantity, the volume of quota is increasing throughout the implementation, and this quota will remain until the end of the implementation. This will never disappear. Okay, and even though the inside quota tariff here, as you can see in green, is reduced over time, the outside quota tariff will remain at the base rate. In this case, you have a transitional quota. It means that for a certain period of time, there will be a quota that is going to apply. So the quantity will increase during that short period of time, but then when the implementation is over, no quota applies anymore. So here in this case, the quantity increased from 6,500 metric ton from the entry into force of the agreement to something around more than 17,000 metric ton. But then from that date, after that period, there will be no quota anymore. And every food preparation containing cocoa that enter originating from the European Union going to Brazil will enter Brazil duty-free, as you can see here. So there will be no quota applied anymore. That's why this is a transitional quota. So the quota is a form of liberalization that will stay for a certain period, but will be removed because the liberalization will become a tariff reduction at the end. That's why that's a transitional quota, and this one is a reciprocal quota. This will remain until the end. So the difference between the two resides firstly on the reciprocality of the quota, meaning that reciprocal quota concerns the same group of products in both schedules, in the schedule of Mercosur countries and in the schedule of the EU, European Union, but also the duration during which this quota will apply also makes the difference between the two. Reciprocal quota will stay in application throughout the implementation of the agreement, while transitional quota is temporary.
We have 1 minute remaining for the discussion session.
Well, we have another question from Tajana Dovuli.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Antonia. That was very interesting. I just wondered, I would expect that currently the quotas are maybe mainly not filled because there are also additional barriers like certain standards and maybe an administration method that is not so easy to look through for the traders. So I wondered how optimistic you are that these things are changing with the new Mercosur agreement, if there are like fundamental changes in standards that will make it much easier for traders to import in the quota and thereby fill it maybe much more than the current quotas that have been given.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. I'm very happy to have you in the session. Regarding your question, that is quite a political question, if I may say, in the sense that how this is a question that is more regulatory matters than the quantitative assessment. But based on the discussion and the studies and the publication that we've read related to Mercosur, no changes in terms of standards and regulation will happen. So in that case, we will have a status quo. And as you can see in our assessment, especially in the case of the EU, some quota, for example, for cheese, is not binding at all, meaning that the demand on this is already very low. No, the export is low, but the outside the quota is very high. The quota volume is high, but Mercosur doesn't export those products much, so there will be no effective liberalization on those. It seems like this schedule is if I may say, kind of useless liberalization for that part. And when it comes to products that are very sensitive, as you can see, the meat, the quota volume is below of what Mercosur already exports. So so there will be no for most products, there will be no significant change in the export under this quota. And that's why we have concluded that for this liberalization through tariff rate quota is in some case inefficient and in very small cases suboptimal. So I please let me know if I answered your question, or feel free to ask again if you need more clarification.
Thank you. That was a very clear and interesting answer. Thanks a lot.
So thank you again, Antonia. So our next presenter is Carlos Javier Gonzalez, a PhD candidate from the Universidad Complutense de Madrid, who will be presenting on a comprehensive short and long run assessment on the impact of the EU Mercosur agreement on Brazil. When you are ready, Carlos Javier, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Gabriela. Good morning, everyone. I am Carlos Javier, a PhD student at the Complutense University of Madrid. Sorry, but I need to keep my camera turned off to make the presentation more fluid. My internet bandwidth is not very good. Sorry for that. My presentation is entitled A Comprehensive Short and Long-Term Assessment of the Impact of the European Union Mercosur Agreement on Brazil. My co-authors in this research are María Latorre, María Concepción Latorre from the Complutense University of Madrid, and Gabriela Ortiz from the National University of Costa Rica. This research is not yet complete, so the model results shown in this presentation correspond only to a static model. Okay. Okay, table of contents. We will follow this order in the topics to be discussed. In the introduction, we are going to talk a little about the agreement and the points that we believe are the most important regarding the tariff reduction of goods and services. We will cite some authors who have done similar research using a CGE model or through structural gravity models. In the model data, a description of the study model in GTAP, some assumptions, and the treatment of the data. The data used to estimate the tariff reductions in trade in goods include quotas and took the most time. We will present some results of the short term impact on some macroeconomic variables and at the sectoral level. Finally, some conclusions of this first part of the study model. Okay, in June 2018, the European Union was made of 28 states. Today, after Brexit, it is 27. And Mercosur, made of Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, signed a strategic partnership agreement after 20 years of negotiations. The trade agreement is one of the largest in the world in terms of scope. The two regions have a combined population of close to 800 million. They have a supply of goods and services on each side of the Atlantic that can be attractive for trade and investment. Their scope is not only limited to the reduction of tariffs on goods, including non-tariff measures, but also includes other issues such as the environment, intellectual property, cooperation, facilitation, economic development, among others. In this research, we will focus only on tariff reduction of goods and services, and whose impact we have separated into three components: tariff reductions of goods, reductions of non-tariff measures to goods and services, and non-tariff measures reductions related to government or public procurement. We have chosen Brazil because it represents about 75% of Mercosur's GDP, and the effect of the agreement on this country will represent a good approximation of the impact on Mercosur as a whole. On the other hand, the effects of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine are not considered in this research. We plan to consider this impact in the dynamic analysis. Regarding to reduce tariff, European Union reduced tariff by 92% of imports from Mercosur over a maximum of 10 years. On the other hand, Mercosur reduced tariff by 91% of imports from the European Union over a maximum of 60 years. In the literature review, we can cite these four great works on the impact of the European Union-Mercosur trade agreement, two of them using a CGE model, that is the research done by London School of Economics and Carrico et al. From Wageningen Economic Research, and the other two using gravity equations, the one by Timini and Biani and the other by Sinabel et al. It's important to mention that the research conducted by London School of Economics is considered the most important for its length and topics to be addressed, and because it was conducted before the closing of the trade agreement in 2018, and then had an update after closing of the agreement in 2020. Regarding model, we use a static CGE model, GTAP. This allows the effect of the agreement in the short run. Our model has 36 sectors based on the 65 sectors of GTAP 10, which have been grouped and renamed in order to simplify the results. 26 sectors correspond to goods and 10 sectors to services. The base tariff for the estimate is that of the GTAP 10. We include 9 regions: European Union, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, United States, Canada, China, and rest of the world. We include 4 factors of production: land, labor, capital, natural resources. Among the assumptions, we have considered to put labor and capital factors on totally mobile, and land and natural resources has immobile. We have separate the impact into 3 components: only tariff reduction, only NTMs, non-trade measures reductions, and the third, only NTM reductions related to public procurement. The sum of these estimates correspond of the total impact of the static model. Okay, regarding the data, this research differs from the previously authored site above because it considers the tariff reduction of goods, including quotas, of the entire negotiated supply, which is part of the annexes of the agreement. The offer of goods for the European Union and Mercosur is available on the official webpage of the Mercosur countries in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But for some reason, the offer has not yet been published on the European Commission webpage. We don't know. The offer of goods negotiated for both regions was updated from a 2012 version of the harmonized system to an updated 2017 versions. With the updated supply, it was possible to associate trade data, values, terms, and tariff to each harmonized system tariff code. The information in HS code was then correlated with the sector of GTAP team. With all these steps, it was possible to estimate the progressive tariff reduction. About the quotas, products such as bean, corn, honey, boneless, poultry, ethanol, among the main ones, are of special interest for European Union imports, as they could generate conflict with local producers. In contrast, products such as garlic, cheese, vehicles, among the most important, are a special interest to Mercosur for the same reason. For these products, applies quotas to limit import quantities, mainly in tons. The quantities within the established limit will benefit from a preferential tariff, and those outside will pay the most favored national tariff. Regarding non-trade measures, according to World Trade Organization, there are two types of non-tariff measures: non-technical measures, such as quotas, licenses, price controls, rules of origin, and technical measure related to human, animal, or plant protection. The latter are difficult to change because they have a function. Data of non-tariff measures for goods is estimated by the World Bank and is presented as an ad valorem. For services, we have consulted the work done by Benz and Jacks regarding certain sectors such as communication, business services, financial services, insurance, and transport for Mercosur and European Union. And for the hotel and restaurant sector, we have taken reference to Fontanier. The trade agreement forces the development of dialogues forums to reduce non-technical measures and technical measures can converge to an international standard. So the reduction for Brazil, we have considered in goods, non-technical, a reduction of 20% in non-technical measures and technical 5%. In the other hand, in European Union, the reduction in non-technical measures, we have considered 10% and technical 3%. Regarding to services, for both is 20% of reduction. About public procurement. Public procurement represents a major step forward in this agreement, since both the European Union and especially Mercosur have a closed market in this area. The agreement foresees a progressive opening in different sectors for different levels, such as central government, regional government, and local government. There are countries that are more open, so that a company from one side can access the public procurement market of the other. After reviewing one by one the negotiated sectors, we assume a 2% reduction for European Union and Brazil in most of the goods sectors. For some services, the reduction is between 6% and 8% for the European Union, and for Brazil, between 4%, 6%, and 8%. Okay, we show some results. We have placed the impact in year 16 That is, after 16 years of application of the agreement, and it coincides with the total tariff reduction for Mercosur countries, including Brazil, of course. This data corresponds to the sum of the individual impacts on tariff reductions, non-trade measures reductions, and non-trade measure reduction related to public procurement. And they are presented as percent change. Sorry for switching the other slide. It's only to show the individual impacts on tariff reduction, non-tariff measures, and public procurement. We can see in this individual result that Uruguay is a country with the highest impact of the agreement on the chosen variables like GDP, private expenditure, wages, capital remuneration, consumer price index. This is just to show the Mercosur country with the highest impact. Returning to Brazil, the highest impact of the three individual components is on tariff reductions, followed by non-tariff measures and the public procurement. Returning to the total data, we can see that the contribution of the agreement to Brazil's GDP is 0.11%, a value higher than the impact on the European Union, but below that of Uruguay and Argentina within Mercosur. Okay, in Brazil, imports exceed exports, which deteriorates the terms of trade. In order to see the latest results for wages, capital remuneration, and the consumer price index, or CPI, it's necessary to review the sectoral results to understand the reason for their increase. Wages and capital remuneration are increasing in some sectors as production. Due to the short time, I cannot show all the results. In goods, for example, in the sector vegetable, fruits, nuts, bovine and other ruminant meats, other animal products, live animal meats and animal products, vegetable oils and fats, food products, in the sector of in services sectors, in the construction. About import of meat and animal products, including, for example, when we can see in the sectoral results, this higher value in imports for Brazil, these live animal meats and animal products correspond to including rabbit, meat, pork, and poultry, and were very strong. There is also a strong import of value-added manufacturers, which could explain the 0.19% value in the consumer price index. As for exports, various products related to food and wearing apparel show a strong role. So, okay, maybe in conclusion, the trade agreement between the European Union and Mercosur is presented as an opportunity to improve welfare in both regions. The current geopolitical scenario that we are experiencing due to the conflict in Europe has led to an increase in the price of some raw materials. In this sense, the search for new sources to supply these commodities is an opportunity to improve the welfare of both regions. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos Javier. So now let's go ahead and take some questions from the audience. Yes, well, we have one question from Zeynep.
Hi, Javier. Thank you so much for this excellent presentation. I just have a clarifying question about the NTM shock. So So you reported that for Brazil and Europe, the reductions for the services NTMs were 20%, and then the non-technical and technical parts have vary a bit between Brazil and Europe. So the non-technical and technical was 10% and 3% for Europe, and they are lower than Brazil. So could you give us a bit of an intuition about why the shocks are lower for Europe? Are they more efficient, or there are fewer restrictions, measures in Europe compared to Brazil? Thanks.
Okay.
Are you muted? Oh, okay. Good.
Yes, sorry. Thank you for your question. Okay, when we have assumed these reductions according to sorry, let me I have to look a job. Sorry.
Maybe while Carlos Javier is looking at this, maybe we can you can add whatever to what I say, Carlos Javier, because you have done a great job in calculating these NTMs. But I think this brings us to the previous question that was posed, saying that whether NTMs reductions would be important. And I must say that I think they can be important in this agreement. So regarding goods, we have differentiated between non-technical and technical NTMs, because if you think about it, technical measures are related to sanitary and phytosanitary barriers or regulations, better said, and we also have technical barriers to trade in that group. We feel that it's harder to converge in technical measures because they are related to regulation that is not easy to change. But for the Mercosur countries, not technical measures, which include measures like automatic licenses and other barriers that are not easy to justify, we feel the agreement can do a great job to reduce them. So that is what we have differentiated between them. And we feel we've been conservative in those reductions. And then regarding the EU side, as Zeynep was sort of pointing out, those measures tend to be lower to begin with, and we think there is less scope to be able to lower them through this agreement. We still think there is room, and I think it's very interesting that the agreement has proposed to converge to international standards, for example, in the regulation, technical regulation of motor vehicles. So we feel there is a will to reduce the differences in regulation to converge to more common standards, but there is less scope in the EU side, and there is much more scope in the Mercosur side. And regarding services, we've put sort of a summary, because really reductions in NTMs to services are different across sectors and across countries. And Carlos Javier has done a great job in calculating what was the scope of the reduction. That is much harder to do than for goods, but we did look at the sectors that were open. We did look at the annexes stating whether those openings were more ambitious or less ambitious. And what we put in there, or what Carlos Javier has put in the presentation, is a summary, but it really is different in Brazil compared to Argentina and compared to Paraguay and Uruguay. And if there is more detail in other papers, and you can have a look at whether how those countries differ in those barrier reductions in services, in those NTMs reductions in services, because that is related to the annexes of the agreement. I don't know, Carlos Javier, if you want to add anything to that. You were looking at some more specific data, I think. I don't know.
No, thank you very much, Concepcion. I was looking for a job to answer, but you know more about this. Concepcion is my testing director and knows much more.
Well, I think Carlos Javier has done a great job in this, so he really knows about it. We could even say that some services sectors were not opened at all. So it really depends on the country and on the sector. It was harder to show all the data for that, but I believe this differentiation also in non-technical and technical barriers matches much of the literature that has been done regarding the calculation of those barriers. We see there is a lot of scope in Mercosur countries related to the non-technical barriers. So we feel the agreement may do a great job in that. I don't know if that.
Thank you. No, it clarifies. Thanks so much. It's a lot of work, and I congratulate Javier for this work. And it's great to see that the split between non-technical, technical, and services. Thanks.
Well, we have done another question from Oliver Reiter.
Thank you, Javier, for the nice presentation, and thank you for featuring our small report in the literature review. I have two small questions. First, on the short-term results, can you explain how the results for Uruguay come about? Because the aggregate exports seem to fall, prices increase. So how does the GDP affect then? How does these things go together? And the second question in the slide after that, you mentioned that Brazil will mainly gain from exporting manufactured goods. And I think if I remember correctly, for example, the London School study finds that Brazil will mostly, or all Mercosur countries, will actually gain a lot in exporting agricultural and primary goods. Also, do you have some idea how this difference comes about? Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. We have not about the first question is about Uruguay and why the imports or some variables are higher than the others countries. Well, we have not investigated what has happened in Uruguay specifically, but it's one that I don't know this.
I may jump in, Carlos Javier, if that is okay, then you can add whatever. I think Uruguay, it's important in what we're looking at the annexes and the levels of the NTMs. It's the country that opens the most across the 4 Mercosur countries. And that you can see that through the imports. Then I think there is this mercantilistic view that if you reduce exports, you will produce less. But if you are increasing your imports, maybe you are using more intermediate inputs that are necessary for you, for your production, and can do a great job because you are importing better varieties from abroad. So I understand it may be counterintuitive that you see there an increase in the exports and still the highest GDP increase. But I think it's important to keep in mind that the aggregated imports, which are also going very, very high, are telling you that there are increases in production, even if they later face some issues in competition, but they are getting better intermediate inputs, better varieties for consumers. So we have written less about that, but I'm sure there is an explanation for that. And the other question, what was it, Carlos Javier? I know. Yes, the LSE. Well, I think, Oliver, you have to keep in mind that the LSE was not using the actual agreement. They were running an ambitious and conservative scenario. So then they really haven't looked at the level of the real tariffs that we have put into the model, or the impact of quotas. Javier did not put much emphasis in the fact that when we say tariffs, it also includes the quotas of the agreement. So the LSE was running like wishful thinking scenarios about the agreement. I don't think, but it's not that I don't think, they haven't used the actual agreement. So I think those results are interesting. It's a great job, but still it's not the agreement.
Mm.
I don't know whether that asks your question,
Yeah,
Oliver.
sure.
Happy to add whatever you like.
No, that
or maybe
answers
Carlos Javier wants to add whatever he thinks is relevant.
Oh, I think we don't have another question. No? Okay, well, thank you again, Carlos Javier, for your presentations. And our next and last presenter is Oliver Reiter, economist from the Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies, who will be presenting implications of the European Union Mercosur Free Trade Agreement for Austria. And well, when you are ready, Oliver, the floor is yours.
So, thank you all for coming to the session. My presentation is titled Implications of the EU Mercosur Association Agreement for Austria, which is I agree, a very regionally specific research topic for a global conference like this. Thanks to Gabriela and Maria for organizing this session. This work was jointly done with my colleague Julia Grübler at the WIIW, as well as with Franz Zinnebel, who works at the WIFO, the Austrian Institute for Economic Research. This was based on a project for the Austrian Ministry for Economics and Digitalization, and thus this regional focus and our focus on applying econometric techniques to inform the current policy discussion in Austria. So to the content, I will shortly go over some descriptives of the EU Mercosur trade, of the status quo of their relationship, and then give an overview of the model, of the results, the data, the counterfactual scenarios that we use, as well as the results of this modeling exercise. So the EU Mercosur relations. Mercosur is a big market. It's, as we already heard in the previous two presentations, it's still quite protected. That's why the EU can benefit from a first mover advantage and be the first bigger region that established a free trade agreement with Mercosur. Mercosur covers about 9% of the world trade area, of the world land area. Its population is with 260 million, smaller than the EU population. But the EU population is about 70% larger, but the EU GDP is actually 6 times bigger. That tells you that Mercosur is really a new market and developing market, and that's why it's also important to establish some trade connections with this region. In the bar charts below, you see the total exports and total imports of the EU, and in the earlier 2000, there were actually a negative trade balance. The EU imported more than it exported to Mercosur. Only starting with about 2012, it sort of shifted back to a more balanced trade balance. If we go a little bit into details, we actually see that 84% of EU exports to the Mercosur market are actually manufacturers or manufactured goods. For example, machinery and appliances, about 30%, chemical and allied industries export 24%, and transport equipment makes up another 13%. All those fall into manufactured goods. On the other hand, imports from Mercosur is mostly about primary products. About 40% are actually agricultural goods. So of those 74%, 40 are about agricultural, foodstuffs, tobacco, and so on. If we split the trade according to the trade partners, Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, we see that Brazil, also being the most populous and biggest country, is actually also the biggest trade partner for the EU 27. Amounting about 30 billion exports and imports. Trading services is a little bit different. Just going it over quickly. For the EU 27, we actually see that it has a positive trade balance with Mercosur. It exports quite a bit more than it imports from the Mercosur region. In this service trade, that's three service sectors featured that very prominently. That's transport and travel, and so-called other business services that make up the bulk of service trade exports. We already heard about trade barriers. Trade barriers are quite still substantial. So lacking access to Mercosur service and public procurement markets is an important barrier to trade that is actually tackled in the Mercosur agreement. Also, the protection of intellectual property rights and geographical indications, GI, as well as an agreement on international standards are also important policy areas for the EU. Currently there's actually different tariff and requirement regimes for the EU member states that would also be simplified and unified. And looking at the tariffs, or the plan would be that about more than 90% of both exports and imports should become duty-free by the end of the introduction phase. If we look at the actual applied tariff, currently applied tariff rates, we see that, for example, for agriculture, it's actually that the EU features a little bit higher tariffs than the four Mercosur countries. In 2018, the average tariff on agricultural goods was about 12% that was applied by the EU on imports from the Mercosur countries, while the other way around, it's more like it was more like 10%. The picture is a bit different for non-agricultural goods. There, the EU has a much lower tariff rate with about 4%, while the the Mercosur countries apply tariff rates of sometimes more than 10%. So a short literature overview. Yeah, some we have already seen. There was a study by the University of Manchester that did a sustainability impact assessment, and they come to the conclusion that they expect economic welfare to increase by 0.1% for the EU and 0.5% for Argentina, and even more for Brazil, Uruguay, and actually 10% for Paraguay. Barrel and others find quite lower numbers, a GDP increase of 0.02 for the EU 12, and about 0.12% GDP increase for the Mercosur countries. Also, the recent study by LSE Consulting, as we already heard, test a conservative and an ambitious scenario, and in their ambitious scenario, they also find that the EU 28 can expect to see GDP increases of 0.1% and 0.1 to 0.7 for the Mercosur countries. In all those studies, it's actually more the manufacturing sectors. So from the EU side, they find that the manufacturing sectors in the EU are actually those that benefit more. So, for example, car and car parts industries, while agricultural sectors tend to lose ground, or at least see more competition. And as we have seen, overall, they still expect to find positive GDP effects. So what we do, we wanted to provide another set of estimates to inform the policy discussion in Austria. The basis for our counterfactual estimation is the structural gravity model. The structural gravity model relates bilateral trade flows to trade policy variables, and then allows to do counterfactual analysis. We combine 4 data sources. For trade flows, we use the UN Comtrade database. For cross outputs, we use UN data. We need data for cross output to calculate intranational trade flows, which are important for theory consistent gravity estimation. For tariffs, we use the WITS database, and data on free trade agreements is sourced from the DESTA database. And the DESTA database is actually very interesting because they grade free trade agreements by their depth. They do so by actually reading the agreements and score them along several dimensions and we use the higher aggregated 7 dimensions, and then use a very simple measure of the depth of an free trade agreement by simply counting how many of the 7 dimensions are filled by an free trade agreement. So those 7 dimensions are if the agreement features tariff reduction, if it has provisions on standards, investments, services, public procurement, competition, and intellectual property rights. So a free trade agreement that would have a value of 0, so has no provisions on any of those of dimensions, while for example, the EU-Korea agreement scores with a 7, so that means it has substantial provisions in all of those 7 dimensions. Yeah. So in the first step, we estimate the gravity model. We follow the Jotov and others from 2016 to do it empirically correct. Their recommendations include to use 3-way fixed effects, to include international flows, and to use PPML estimation for to account for heteroscedasticity. The results that we find are pretty standard. That's why I'm not going into depth here. We find that trade flows actually have that tariff have a negative effect on trade flows, and free trade agreements have a positive effect on trade flows. So that's the very standard results that we find, and those results are then the basis for our counterfactual estimates. There we follow others, Anderson and others. In their methodology, they use the results from the gravity estimation and calculate implied trade costs, and then we change the trade policy variables of our interest. Here we set the trade the free trade dummy or the free trade depth to a higher level, and set the tariffs back to 0, and that allows us to calculate counterfactual trade costs, and that in turn then allows the calculation of counterfactual trade flows and counterfactual GDP. And from then you can compare the actual with the counterfactual and see how trade policy change would affect the GDP. We base our estimation on the year 2015 because that's the latest year for which we have a full data sample. We use 4 scenarios. We assume that the Mercosur agreement, or the EU Mercosur agreement, has a depth of 5. So as I said, we assume that it fulfills 7 of those 5 dimensions that are set. The reason is the text of the Mercosur agreement currently, or at least to my knowledge back then, was that they do not cover investment provisions and are also vague on the issues of competition. Thus, it has, or we assume it has a depth of 5 out of 7. Additionally, we test 2 different scenarios where we once do not change any of the tariffs, and in the other scenario we actually set all tariffs to 0. We saw that the Mercosur agreement actually plans to abolish trade on about 91% of all tariff lines. So the all tariffs being set to 0 is actually then the scenario that's then closer to reality, if you want so. And additionally, as the EU currently renegotiates its agreement with Chile and Mexico, which are, so to say, in the nearer neighborhood, we additionally test what the effects would be if the Chile and Mexico agreements would be modernized to resemble the EU-South Korea agreement, so that it would also be upgraded to a full depth free trade agreement with that scores 7 out of 7 trade dimensions, free trade agreement dimensions. So
2 minutes. 2 minutes
our
reminder.
results.
2 minutes reminder. Sorry.
So say again.
2 minutes are remaining.
Okay. Perfect. So coming to the results, in the columns you see the 4 scenarios. In the first 2 columns are only if the Mercosur agreement were in force in 2015, what would be the counterfactual GDP changes, and if there's no tariff change, that would be the first column. And if there's if we set all tariffs to 0, then we have to look at the results in column 2. And there we see that the EU28 will see GDP increases about 0.07 or 0.8%, and the effects for Mercosur countries are actually a magnitude higher. There we expect to see GDP changes of about 0.3 to 0.5% from Brazil to Uruguay. In that scenario, Mexico and Chile would actually, Mexico would slightly lose due to trade diversion, while Chile would also see some smaller GDP increases. And if we look to the to columns 3 and 4, where we not only model the counterfactual where the Mercosur agreement is in place, but also the agreement with Chile and Mexico will be modernized. There we see some small changes to the results in column 2, slightly higher GDP increases, and there also Mexico would actually slightly gain, and also Chile in that way. We also see that if we compare column 1 and 2 and column 3 and 4, that actually the tariff changes are quite substantial, or that the tariff changes still play a big role in determining the size of the expected GDP change. So concluding, the results that we find are actually quite similar to other results in the literature, especially the Burrell and others and the London School of Economics study. We find that the increases for the Mercosur countries are a magnitude bigger than for the EU 28 countries. The exports for Mercosur countries would increase by about 25 to 40%, and GDP by 0.3 to 0.5. If we translate this into per capita real income increases, that we would surprisingly find that actually both regions would see the GDP, the per capita real income increase would be about 27 euros for both regions. So in absolute terms, the EU would gain actually more. So the EU GDP would increase by about 12 billion, while the Mercosur GDP by 7.2 billion. We saw that tariff reductions still play an important role, and that Mexico would slightly lose due to the EU Mercosur agreements being established, while Chile as a neighboring country would actually profit from it. And we see in our additional scenario that the modernization, the increasing depth increasing the depth of the agreements with Mexico and Chile had also slightly positive effects. With that, I'm at the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention. The full report can actually be found at the FIW site under publications and research reports. Thank you very much, and looking forward to your questions.
So thank you, Oliver. And well, we have one question from María.
Thank you, Oliver, for this very insightful presentation. I've always read your paper on Mercosur with great interest. I think you touch on very important issues there. I feel this is an extension of it, right? Because, is that correct? Because I don't remember those simulations in which you also take into account the deepening of or the revision of the agreements with Chile and Mexico. Anyway, so maybe I'll have a look at this paper also. I think the results that were previously shown, particularly the ones from Carlos Javier, are in line with what you get, in the sense that you derive that the Brazil experiences the lowest impact, and then comes Argentina. It's always positive, but I feel you get, and that's what we've seen from their ambition regarding the liberalization. We find, of course, there is a size issue behind that as well, but Brazil is clear from what we've seen that they are the less ambitious in the liberalization, both in services and in manufacturers. That's what we found when we look at those annexes. Argentina was more liberal, we found, from what we read. And then Paraguay and Uruguay get the largest impact. We get them in an inverse order, but still I think it's nice that we are aligned in those results using different methodologies, which I think is relevant. So I was happy to check that again and see that was what you got. I also realized that you didn't get any trade diversion when Mexico and Brazil, no, excuse me, and Chile also signed this agreement, which is like they don't seem to be competing with these Mercosur countries in their relationships with the EU. I was a bit surprised by that, but maybe it's because Brazil is the largest. Well, Mexico must be a bit even larger than that. I would have to check, but I don't know. I was curious on this DESTA classification. I will have a look. I don't know if I understood you correctly, but you said that the Mercosur agreement did not include investment provisions. We've been looking at that, and they have a Mode 3 liberalization opening. So I don't know if DESTA is telling that this agreement is not open in that regard, but that does not match what the agreement, the annexes and so on are saying. So just in case, and in fact, we derive in other papers that when you introduce the FDI, foreign direct investment dimension, you get a much larger impact both for the EU and for the Mercosur countries. So I think that's nice that things can be even larger when you introduce this impact, which I think is harder to model, but that it can be an important part of the story also.
Yeah, that could be that the DESTA database is maybe was considering maybe an older version of the text, or I don't know. Anyway,
I didn't know that source, so I'll keep an eye on that because I've never checked that. So it's nice. It's nice to know about it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's not only an indicator of the existence of free trade agreement, but also how what topics they cover. So that's very helpful. Yeah, and I think it's very interesting that we're actually using very different methodologies. You're using very full-blown CGE models, and this model is actually quite a off-the-shelf standard gravity model, and we still get results that are at least roughly in line with each other, and that's very helpful and nice to see. So this structural gravity model does not include any input-output linkages, but I think your CGE model would probably already do that. Yeah, so that's it's a shortcoming.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Oliver. I think it was very nice to have you. Thank you for accepting the invitation.
Thank you for organizing the session. Thank you. Thanks again.
Well, we have another question from the audience. No? Let me see. No. Oh, yes. Zeynep.
Hi, thank you, Oliver, for this great presentation. My question is about the results for Mexico. So it loses from this agreement and the amount is not too sizable. I was wondering whether is there any effect of that Mexico is part of USMCA? Do you see any effect of that, or do you plan to do any work on the effect of USMCA on Mercosur countries? Yeah, thanks.
So the USMC trade agreement does not play any role here. So we only sort of change the dummy for the EU Mercosur agreement, and the negative effect just comes from trade diversion from the EU sourcing more from Mercosur countries because of lower tariffs and so on than from Mexico. So that it would be interesting to see if the new USMCA has any sizable effects on that. Well, it could be, but it's difficult to tell. Thanks for the recommendation, and maybe I'll look into it. Thanks.
Thanks.
Maria, do you have another question?
No, I was thinking that is a very interesting point, the one of the USMCA. I haven't gone through that in much detail, but my view on that is that the changes have been superficial. Is that your take on the new USMCA? I think it promised to be something like a huge change, and in the end, at least, I mean, as I say, I haven't gone through the details, but from what I've read, I don't know what is your view on that. I think that's relevant also.
I think they have. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no. I just wanted to say that I also have no substantial idea how the tariff rates changed, or how the rules of origin or something, how that changed. But I don't think that that you should expect big trade revolutions from that new upgrading of the USMCA agreement. And Zeynep?
Yeah, it doesn't seem that they've updated so many of the things, and that not much sizable changes. But was just wondering whether there is any kind of interaction between Mercosur and USMCA when they go into effect. So yeah, I haven't looked into the details of each sector, but they've done a lot of work on it. So wondered. Thanks.
Well, if we don't have another question, so that's wrap up our final presentation, a discussion period for this session on different approaches to the EU Mercosur agreement, recent estimations. So please help me in thanking our presenters, Antonia, Carlos Javier, and Oliver, for their valuable and thought-provoking presentations. We appreciate everyone joining us. Hope you enjoyed the remainder of the conference. So thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you too.
Thank you very much, Gabriela.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
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 I can hear you, Maria.
Zeynep,
Yes.
where are you now? In Turkey?
I'm in Turkey. Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. And how is life?
It's going well. Thank God it's summer. The winter was a bit rough here, but we're doing well. How about you?
Well, Gabriela is also here. I'm very well. I'm in Madrid and very happy. A lot of work, but that is good.
That's good.
So what are you doing now, Zeynep? Are you working in these matters or what have, I was curious, but I don't want to be indiscreet. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm now working as the coordinator of GTAP University. So we're streamlining the courses. Yes.
I've seen that.
Looking for new courses. We're going to open up a portal soon for external instructors to apply with their course proposals. So if you have any ideas, stay tuned. We'll let you know when the portal is live so you can apply and teach at GTAPU. So that's what we've been doing, and then doing some research on the side, but mostly focused on the GTAP University. It's been fun. I love the teaching side.
Okay, and what research are you doing now? What, if I may ask, what are you looking at? You have that great model, Zeynep, and I think you can get a lot from that.
I'm working on the updates of the model. So the GTAP's classic model is now converted into version 7. So I want to update GTAP HAT with version 7 features. And also I have done a lot of work on parameter estimation for the Pareto distribution shape parameter. I want to get that finalized and publish, hopefully. So those are the two things that I'm mostly focused on.
Zeynep, that wonderful paper I've cited several times, the one on one model to rule them all.
Thanks for citing it.
No, it's very hard to get citations. No, but I thought it was tremendously good. So,
thank you.
It was very helpful for me to read that, to keep that in, those descriptions. Absolutely.
That was my goal. So that's a good literature survey, but I haven't published it. It's on the USITC website as one of the research papers there, but I haven't published it in anywhere. So I think it needs a bit of an update because there are many other heterogeneity models in GTAP after that paper. So it needs to get updated, and then
I think it would be helpful, Zeynep, if you manage to do that. It's true that we are doing many things, and then it's hard to cope with, new updates on things and so on. But I think that paper is super good. You should publish it.
Thanks, Maria. I really appreciate the encouragement.
Absolutely. No.
Thank you.
I think you've done very good contributions with this. Introducing such a hard thing into the GTAP CGE. And I think you should get, credit for that.
Thank you. Maybe once I update the model to version 7 and fix some issues, I'll work on the literature review part. So I've been doing this literature review modeling and then the parameter side to get like a comprehensive thing out. But it takes a lot of time to get that.
No,
Thank you, but I really appreciate the support.
No, it's very sincere. I think you've done a great job, so I hope you can culminate it.
Thank you. And congratulations on the session. It was wonderful. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
And it's a lot of work to do the NTM parts. And it was
we've paid a lot of attention to that, honestly. We haven't put that into the papers because really there is not the scope sometimes to get into such details, but
it's a lot of detail.
Have spent, we did this for our government, so we have something more focused on Spain, but now we are looking at the EU results because we feel they are more relevant. But it has been a crazy amount of work.
I can
now
imagine.
It's there. We hope we will be able to publish it soon in journals and so on, but we are working on that now.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Okay, I was very happy to see you, Zeynep.
So happy to see you.
You have done a great job in hosting the sessions.
Thank you.
Also asking questions, all the roles,
Thank you. Thanks for organizing the session and Gabriela for chairing the session. It was very efficient, very well done. So thanks.
Well, it was a pleasure to see you both again. and Zeynep, where we keep in touch for the
Yes, let's keep in
database.
touch for the database. Yes.
Yes. Well,
Okay,
see you.
Zeynep.
Bye.
See you. Enjoy the
Take
rest of the
care and
conference.
thank you very much.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.